And U.S. President Donald Trump claims back-channel talks with a senior Iranian official has yielded major points of agreement.
Well, Iran denies having any such contact with the Americans, calling it a trick to cool the markets and buy time for themselves. Trump had given Iran a 48-hour ultimatum to reopen the Strait of Hormuz shipping lane. But hours before that deadline, Trump fired a Truth Social post he extended it by 5 days, saying US and Iran have held very good and productive conversations in recent days.
We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other. But we've had very strong talks. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner had them.
Iran was quick to deny Trump's claims. Sources cited in Iranian media said no direct or indirect talks were taking place. Trump blamed it on Iran's broken and battered communications.
Well, they're going to have to get themselves better public relations people. We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other.
Reports also said that the US negotiators may meet an Iranian delegation for talks in Pakistan, with Vice President J.D. Vance possibly joining in the talks. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt did not deny these reports. Trump, however, indicated that the talks may happen over the phone.
So the discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal, too. We're going to get together today by probably phone because it's very hard to find a country. It's very hard for them to get out, I guess. But we'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
However, Iranian Foreign Ministry denied any negotiations. It said friendly countries recently sent messages to Iran indicating U.S. desire to begin talks, but Iran has not responded. It also said Iran's stance on the Strait of Hormuz has not changed.
Now, the spokesperson for the Iranian Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, Ibrahim Rezai, also put out a statement. He said that Trump was either lying or, quote-unquote, well, talking nonsense. That's what he says. Another senior Iranian official, he says that they denied Trump's claim that the country's parliament speaker, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf, said no negotiations, who said that no negotiations have been held with the US, and he called Trump's assertions fake news meant to manipulate financial and oil markets.
Now, interestingly, the U.S. media outlet Axios had identified Ghalibaf as the official who was talking to Trump's envoy, citing an unnamed Israeli official. And meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he had spoken to Trump. He said Trump thinks a deal is possible, but vowed to continue striking Iran and Lebanon. All right, to discuss more, we are now being joined live by Lynn O'Donnell from Sydney in Australia. She's a journalist and an author. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on the broadcast. Let me begin by the statements and the timing of the statement. What we know is that the statement came right before 7 a.m. when the markets open, and these 5 days are, of course, when the markets will close on Friday, after Friday. What do you think of this particular time period? And Trump saying that they've been talking back-channel talks and Iran denying them.
Well, it's quite likely that Trump is talking to the markets, but it's also quite likely that there has been some communication with Iranian officials whom he hasn't named about reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So he did issue the 48-hour ultimatum over the reopening of the strait, which is tied clearly to oil flows. And as the deadline hit, he paused strikes and signalled talks, and oil prices immediately dropped by by more than 10%, and prices of stocks on Wall Street went up. So that tells you that the real dynamic is that the deadline wasn't just military pressure, it was also market signalling. And there is a deeper problem here. The war has already damaged energy infrastructure, disrupted global oil supply, as we know, except to chosen and approved customers of Iran, China, India, Russia. Meaning that prices are staying structurally high, and the International Energy Agency has warned of a major threat to the global economy. So the bottom line is that it looks less like a climb down and more like a tactical delay, as you said, 5 days market to market, to stabilise the markets and buy time while keeping the military leverage intact. They're not backing down on the threats. As Trump said, they're going to keep bombing their little hearts out if they don't get what they want, but we don't know what it is that they want, and we don't know where their message is hitting in Iran.
Lynn, it's interesting you mentioned that he was talking to the markets. I just want to take it further from there before we get into the diplomatic statements that came in. Do you feel speaking to the markets is more important to Trump at this point? Is that hurting the US more than what's actually happening on the battlefield?
Oh, I think there's an awful lot going on there. As we've talked about before, Trump is heading into the midterms in November. High oil prices are very, very unpopular with American consumers. He was elected on a platform of bringing prices down, prices of food, creating jobs, keeping fuel prices stable. And all of a sudden, we've got wars up the wazoo where he's basically counteracting and contradicting by his own actions what he was elected to do. So, yes, I think he's talking to the markets. And the most important constituency for any political leader is the domestic one, and especially so for Donald Trump, because of the midterm elections, the pressure that he is facing going into them. So, yeah, I think sensibly he's speaking to the domestic consumer and the domestic markets, but also the oil price is international. He needs the oil price to also look as if it's coming down, because he's facing international political pressure, as we know, trying to call in other countries to send military support to get the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, and facing a lot of pushback on that. So he needs the oil price to come down, because every political leader in the world is facing pressure from their consumers and their constituencies.
Since you mentioned midterm elections, would you call this decision by Trump a strategic win for him? Because, yes, were talks going on before, and last year when the attack was happening? Yes, even now, talks are being happening, or as being claimed. Do you think would this be a strategic win for Trump, considering the fact the damage that has been done with the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei eliminated, many top leaders being eliminated? How would this look for Trump? Is this a strategic win going into the midterm elections?
The only way we can tell is if the price of oil at the fuel pump for American consumers comes down. We're 3 weeks into this war, and prices have gone up across the world by 30%, and a slight fallback is just selling pressure. It's the markets reacting as the way markets do. You sell and take profit on signals, but we haven't seen it come back down to where it was 3 weeks ago. We're going to see these fuel price increases at every stage of the consumption. At every stage of consumption, it's food, it's clothes, it's everything you do. We're hearing about fuel premiums being added to flight tickets, prices just within Europe of $6,000 just to get from one country to another. This is incredible leverage for at the consumer level for providers of goods and services. And I don't see any strategic win in this at all. Even claims of talking with Iranian leaders, they're denying it. We have no reason to disbelieve that because he's not saying who he's talking to, and we're not seeing any pullback by the Iranians on the leverage that they have. To be quite frank with you, no, I see no strategic win here.
Understood. Lynn, let me come to this statement that came out from Joe Kent, the former director of National Counter-Terrorism Center, who had resigned owing to the Iran war and what's happening there and lack of an objective that he sees in it. He said that until Israel is reined in, there can be no de-escalation. That's pretty much the crux of that post from him. Do you see it the same way?
I think, what he said was no de-escalation without reining in Israel, as you've just outlined. And I think that in practical terms, that's probably correct. Israel is pursuing the war on its own terms, with its own aims, which is essentially degrading Iran's military and strategic capabilities. And that creates some escalation momentum outside of US control. So even as Trump talks of de-escalation, Israeli strikes have continued, Iranian retaliation has also continued. So you get a structural contradiction. Washington signals restraint while Israel sustains the pressure. Now, how much they're talking to each other, we don't know yet, but it seems that one side is undermining any credible talk of a ceasefire pathway at this stage. So de-escalation requires a synchronized restraint from all sides, and right now I don't see that existing, which plays into what Ken says. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, and I see you mentioned Israel there. Of course, we're going to come back to you, and we'll talk about Netanyahu's statements right in. But we'll be taking a very short break, Lynn, and we'll have you back with more insights.